Welcome to the Make It a Better Day podcast, where we explore practical ways to create positive change in our lives. I'm Alex, and today we've got a fascinating topic that I think will resonate deeply with all of our listeners.
Hi everyone, I'm Victoria. I'm particularly excited about today's discussion because it addresses something I've personally been grappling with lately, that constant tension between where we are and where we want to be.
Before we dive in, I'd love to hear more about that personal experience you're hinting at.
Well, I recently caught myself in this classic situation. I was sitting in my home office, surrounded by sticky notes and deadlines, scrolling through LinkedIn and seeing all these amazing career achievements from former classmates. Before I knew it, I'd spent an hour in this comparison spiral, feeling increasingly stressed about where I should be in my career.
Oh, that LinkedIn rabbit hole. I think we've all been there. It's actually perfect context for today's article, Bridging the Gap, From Stress to Serenity in the Present. The piece opens with this profound quote from Eckhart Tolle: "Stress is caused by being here but wanting to be there."
That quote stopped me in my tracks because it so perfectly captures what I was experiencing. But I'm curious about your take on it. How do you see this playing out in your life?
Just last week, I was at a coffee shop working on some projects, and I found myself doing that thing where you're physically present but mentally somewhere else entirely. I was planning next year's goals, thinking about home renovations, dreaming about future travel, everything except focusing on the work right in front of me.
It's amazing how universal this experience is, isn't it? The article really breaks down why this creates so much stress in our lives. Can we dig into that a bit?
Absolutely. The article explains that it's not our current situation or even our goals that create stress, it's that constant tension between them. It's like trying to drive a car while constantly looking in the rearview mirror and at the GPS instead of the road in front of you.
That's such a great analogy. And speaking of analogies, the article uses this fascinating example of Sylvester Stallone's journey. Want to explore that story? It's pretty incredible.
Yes, it's such a powerful illustration of this concept. Before becoming Rocky Balboa, Stallone was actually homeless at one point, right?
Exactly. He was taking any odd job he could find, from cleaning lion cages at the Central Park Zoo to working as a movie theater usher. But here's what's fascinating. Instead of letting the gap between his reality and his dreams paralyze him, he used it as fuel for creativity.
And didn't he write the script for Rocky in just 3 days?
Yes, but here's the part that really resonates with our topic. When studios wanted to buy the script but cast someone else as Rocky, Stallone refused to sell unless he could play the lead role. He was offered up to $360,000 for the script alone, which would be worth over $1.5 million today.
And this was when he was basically broke, right?
Completely broke. He'd even had to sell his dog because he couldn't afford to feed him. But here's where it gets really interesting. Stallone wasn't just blindly believing in himself. He was actually using many of the principles the article discusses about bridging the gap between here and there.
Can you break those down for our listeners?
So first, he was fully aware of his present reality, his here. He wasn't denying his circumstances or pretending things were different. Second, he had a clear vision of his there becoming a successful actor. But most importantly, he found a way to work within that gap productively.
That reminds me of the article's section on practical strategies. Should we walk our listeners through those?
Definitely. The article outlines several approaches, starting with mindfulness. Want to try a quick mindfulness exercise with our listeners right now?
That's a great idea. Let's do it.
Okay, everyone, wherever you are right now, whether you're driving, at the gym, or doing dishes, take a moment to notice 3 things: the temperature of the air on your skin, any sounds you can hear, and the rhythm of your breathing. This is what we call a micro-mindfulness moment.
I love how accessible that is. You know, when people hear mindfulness, they often think they need to sit in lotus position for an hour, but it can be as simple as that quick check-in.
Exactly, and the article mentions another powerful technique, the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise. Should we explain that one?
Yes, but first, can you share why grounding exercises are so important for bridging this gap between here and there?
Think of it this way. When we're stressed about the gap between our current reality and our goals, we're usually mentally time traveling, either worrying about the future or regretting the past. Grounding exercises literally bring us back to earth, to this moment.
That makes so much sense. So how does the 5-4-3-2-1 technique work?
You start by identifying 5 things you can see right now, then 4 things you can touch or feel. Next, 3 things you can hear, then 2 things you can smell, and finally, 1 thing you can taste. It's like a sensory countdown that anchors you in the present moment.
I can see how this would be especially helpful in those moments when the gap feels overwhelming, like during my coffee shop moment or your LinkedIn spiral.
Absolutely, and the article makes another crucial point about reframing our perspective on current circumstances. Instead of seeing our here as just a waiting room for our there, we can view it as a training ground.
Can you give some examples of how to do that reframing?
Sure. Let's say you're in an entry-level position but dreaming of a management role. Instead of just feeling frustrated about not being there yet, you can ask yourself, what leadership skills can I practice right now? How can I learn from observing current managers? What projects can I volunteer for that will build relevant experience?
Those are great examples, and it reminds me of another point from the article about setting realistic, incremental goals. Want to explore that?
Yes, this is crucial because often the gap feels overwhelming because we're focusing on the entire distance we need to cover, rather than the next step in front of us.
Like trying to climb a mountain by staring at the peak instead of watching where you're putting your feet.
Exactly, the article suggests breaking down big goals into smaller, achievable steps. For example, if your there is running a marathon, your here might be barely being able to run a mile. Instead of getting overwhelmed by the gap, you focus on increasing your distance by small increments each week.
This connects back to the Stallone story too, doesn't it? He didn't just dream of being a movie star, he wrote a script, took acting classes, and created opportunities step by step.
Yes, and he remained engaged with his present reality while working toward his goals. That's really the key message of the article. It's not about ignoring either the here or the there, but about finding a way to honor both.
As we wrap up, what would you say is your biggest takeaway from this discussion?
For me, it's the idea that the gap between where we are and where we want to be doesn't have to be a source of stress. It can actually be a space for growth, creativity, and personal development. What about you?
I love that perspective. For me, it's the practical tools for managing that gap, the mindfulness exercises, the reframing techniques, and the importance of breaking down big goals into smaller steps.
And speaking of practical tools, our listeners can find more articles and videos like today's article on the Make It a Better Day website.
We've also got some amazing products in our Redbubble store, including journals you can use for goal setting and mindfulness practice.
Before we go, let's challenge our listeners to try the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise at least once today. Remember, every journey starts with being fully present in your here, even as you work toward your there.
Thanks for joining us today on Make It a Better Day. Until next time, remember that the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't just empty space, it's your path to growth.